Welcome back to the Game Collection. Last time, I talked about Hexyz Force, an RPG on the PSP that might cost you a pretty penny. Like my review, this game was split into two halves, Cecilia's and Levant's stories. Last time I talked about Cecilia's story and provided some basic information for the game, but this time I'm going to talk about Levant's story and provide my overall impressions. I am SuperDerek, and this is Hexyz Force. Again.
The second quest of Hexyz Force follows Levant, a proud and elite knight of the Rosenblum Empire, a kingdom on the opposite side of the Black Precipice from where Cecilia's tale began. Rather than an abrupt beginning that we got with Cecilia's tale, what we get with Levant's is a slow-moving train on a crash course with tragedy. Levant's story takes place during the aftermath of this tragedy, where his sympathy for the enemy puts him on the wrong side of the law. That's not to imply that Levant is perfect, though. In fact, in the beginning, it's been made pretty clear that he's bigoted against the halves, half-human races consisting of elves, ligers, and lycans. Throughout the story, he's forced to side with these halves and gradually overcome his prejudices. The character progression in this story was a lot more believable since it shows the events that exposed him to the new aspects of these other races that sparked the changes in his ideology.
In a way, it's not terribly far removed from the story we've all seen, read, and watched 100 times before in the likes of Fern Gully, Avatar, The Last Samurai, and Dances with Wolves.
But what separates this tale from monotony is the fact that it's more or less just a backdrop for the real story. The game writers used this trope effectively as a means for showing us a well-developed and diverse world, and it also sort of acts as the impetus for our hero's adventure, which of course then interweaves with Cecilia's story of saving the world. One of the mechanics of the game that I omitted from my first review is the ability to craft items and improve weaponry. When a battle has been completed, you'll find that not only do you receive experience points, but force points, and most likely a few animal parts like scales, pelts, fangs, etc. Experience points are pretty self-explanatory, but force points in the game are sort of a mystical currency that you can use to perform miracles such as restoring a fallen bridge, or heal a tree, and more importantly they can be infused into your weapons known as ragnafacts. Force points can be spent on improving your weapon's attack stats, skill level, which grants the users new techniques and spells, or resonance, which minimally affects the cost of those spells and techniques. Because of this, you'll rarely have to fuss with changing your character's weapons. Armor is another story though. Those animal bits you shave off when you kill your foes can be fused into useful items, assuming you've got all the parts that you need. The majority of what you'll be fusing in this game are better armors for your crew. The rest can be converted into more force points. It's kinda sorta like Monster Hunter Lite in a way. For players interested in Hexyz Force, but are also looking for a challenge, I would recommend starting with Levant's tale. Cecilia's crew, while full of weaker characters, has the benefit of Cecilia being a very effective white mage, which can lead to very few instances where you actually die. Levant's crew, however, doesn't have a white mage. Instead, you'll be forced to fuse items together into one-off healing items. However, since I played Levant's second quest, I started off the game with quite a load of force points left over from Cecilia's quest, which I immediately invested into my character's weapons, making even Levant's story a walk in the park. Also, new party members joined Levant with their ragnafacts at the same level that I had them at when I beat the final boss. In part 1 of this Hexyz Force review, I also mentioned how every once in a while, these two stories would interconnect. Now I think that a better way to put that would be that these stories are interwoven quite intricately, even though Cecilia and Levant only bump into each other a handful of times. I really have to say, I am far more impressed with this game after playing through Levant's tale, because now I'm able to see both sides of the story and how well everything just meshed together.
I think it was a pretty interesting choice to have the player play through an entire quest at a time. I've seen other games where this sort of thing happens, but the story would instead shift focus every other chapter or so.
Hexyz Force, though, is the first game that I've played that chooses to do things this way, though. I think that both methods of telling concurrent stories have merits and drawbacks. The drawback to the traditional swapping back and forth between stories is that it breaks your momentum and it halts the narrative. That fact is one of the very few things that I didn't really care for in Breath of Fire 4. But I don't even think Breath of Fire 4 could have come close to pulling off the story in the style of Hexyz Force. At least, not without becoming a much bigger game.
The main drawback for Hexyz Force's method is that, for the first playthrough, players are going to be left in the dark quite a bit since you're only getting half of the story. And in the second playthrough, when you're getting that other half of the story, you already pretty much know how things are going to play out, which can take away from a lot of the climax.
I really have to congratulate Hexyz Force on managing to pull off two completely different stories in the exact same world. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask was made as a challenge to make a second game using the same assets, but Hexyz Force made two games in the exact same world in the exact same timeline. And that's pretty damn cool. Because Hexyz Force has two different protagonists, the epilogue for each is different, but there are other factors as well that determine what ending you're shown. Throughout the game, at the end of every chapter, you're rated on your actions. Things that you do will either be counted against you as destructive points, while positive things that you do will be counted towards creation. Depending on how many points you acquire, during the Hour of Judgment it'll be revealed that the world favors creation, destruction, or neutrality. This means that there are 3 different endings for each protagonist, giving a total of 6 different possible endings. Combine that with the fact that once you've completed both quests you unlock hard mode, and what you've got is a very fun RPG with tons of replay value. Which brings me back to the question that I left you with at the end of the last video. Is Hexyz Force really worth that $80 price tag? And after thinking long and hard about it, I have to say that it entirely depends on the style of player that you are. If you're a one and done kind of person and you probably won't play through the game more than one time through, it's probably not for you. But on the other hand, if you're that kind of person who's perfectly content to explore every nook and cranny of a game in order to max out all your weapon stats and get all of the best armors and see all of the possible endings, you could easily get your $80 value out of this game.
But that's not really to say that this game is just for completionists. You can get Hexyz Force on the PlayStation Network for about $15, and if you only play through one quest, play through Levant, and you'll easily get your $15 experience. But I would still recommend playing through Cecilia's quest after that in order to get the full effect. Hexyz Force is an awesome time sink. It's got an intricate story and novel gameplay mechanics that will keep you entertained for hours, and that's why it's got a spot in the game collection.